Hi, everyone. I wanted to just address the peace deal that is currently in place with a signing to come on Friday between the United States and Iran relating to the war that has been going on there since February 28th. Canada warmly welcomes the deal, and we wish to see progress leading into Friday, the signing of the MOU, and of course 60 days thereafter, which would be the final signing of the terms of the deal. In particular, what we are looking forward to, which we are warmly welcoming, is the reduction of tensions, the increased regional stability, as well as the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which has had a grave impact, having been closed, on the global economy, on humanitarian aid and supply chains, and of course on international law itself in terms of freedom of navigation. These are all issues that we are watching. C'est très important maintenant d'attendre pour le vendredi le travail maintenant, de s'assurer qu'il y aura une entente durable et après 60 jours, une entente permanente entre les parties, mais c'est un bon événement à ce moment et on va continuer de s'assurer que nous travaillons avec nos partenaires.
Minister, when do you think the Strait of Hormuz could realistically open?
It's a good question. Right now, the work is being done to open the strait on Friday, assuming that the MOU is signed between the parties. Of course, there are a number of ships waiting to pass through, and so as soon as possible thereafter would be the ideal scenario. And in particular, what we want to see is the supply chains that have been hampered since the strait has been closed reopening. So that means the freedom of navigation for energy, the freedom of navigation for fertilizer, the freedom of navigation for helium, and the list goes on. And that is why Canada is so very much supportive of the work that's being done on this deal. And indeed, I was in Bahrain last week. I was meeting with the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council. And their work and their words, in fact, are that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has negatively impacted their economies in different ways. But if you look at economies like Qatar and Bahrain, their economic growth has slowed considerably and really needs this strait to be opened in order to pick up. So it's important for regional economic stability as well as global economic stability, and we're very much supporting the work that's being done in this deal that should be signed in Switzerland on Friday, with the 60-day time period for the final deal to be signed.
Help with the demining efforts as proposed by Europe. Are we going to help with that?
So you have, of course, heard the Defense Minister and the Prime Minister and myself reiterate that it would take a permanent ceasefire in order for Canada to come to the table with a specific set of measures. Of course, we do not have a permanent ceasefire as of yet, and the conversations between Canada and our allies are continuing along these lines. And in particular, you know that the Prime Minister is at the G7 at this very moment, and he's having those conversations with other G7 leaders. I, for my part, have been speaking with both Jean-Noel Barrot, my counterpart in France, as well as Yvette Cooper, my counterpart in the UK, visiting both of those countries last week, indicating that Canada continues to stand with that coalition of countries on the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, and will be looking to do more once a ceasefire is in place. But of course, those are the conversations that are happening at this very moment.
Français, quand est-ce que vous êtes confiante que le détroit d'Ormuz va pouvoir réouvrir? Et qu'est-ce que pourrait être la contribution du Canada?
Oui, c'est une question très importante en ce moment pour l'économie globale et aussi pour la stabilité régionale. Donc, à ce moment, on pense que ça va être le vendredi après la signature sur l'entente. Mais on doit attendre, on doit être prudent maintenant, parce que nous allons avoir une entente, j'espère, le vendredi, mais c'est 60 jours après ça pour une entente permanente. Mais j'entends que ça va être le vendredi.
Et qu'est-ce que le Canada pourrait faire pour contribuer à ce que ça soit ouvert?
Oui, comme j'ai dit en anglais juste maintenant, nous avons déjà dit que si nous avons une cessez-le-feu permanente, on peut aider la situation avec nos alliés. Par exemple, la France, par exemple, le Royaume-Uni. Mais nous n'avons pas encore une cessez-le-feu permanente. Donc, à ce moment, il y a des conversations, la dialogue entre les pays qui vont aider la situation, qui vont stabiliser la région après une cessez-le-feu permanent.
Just on the G7, is there any hope that there might be a bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Carney and Minister Trump?
I know that things are very fluid on the ground. The Prime Minister, whom I just saw on Friday, is meeting with a number of people in group settings as well as bilaterally, and I'm sure that he will be pressing Canada's interests at every turn, as he did when I saw him in the bilateral with France on Friday.
Are you going to be going to Geneva for the signing of this deal, or is the Prime Minister going to be heading there?
At this point, I'm not going to be attending. On Sunday, Monday, I'll be leaving to attend the Organization of American States meeting in Panama, and I have just returned from Europe and the Gulf region. But suffice it to say, and I'm glad you asked that question, David, the foreign minister work that has been occurring with my counterparts, for example, Pakistan, Egypt, Qatar, and the United States foreign ministers have all been integrally involved in this conversation, and I will be traveling to Pakistan in the coming weeks to further the conversations about how Canada can do further work. And finally, I'll say that over the past number of months, since February 28th, the situation in the Gulf, particularly for our partners in the Gulf, has been particularly difficult, not just in terms of very much preventing economic growth, especially because they rely so heavily on shipping lanes, but also because of the retaliatory strikes that have been coming from Iran to numerous countries in the Gulf. In fact, when I was landing in Manama, Bahrain, on Wednesday morning, it was just after some of those retaliatory strikes. As I was taking off, just 14 hours later, retaliatory strikes were hitting again. And so the situation, as I experienced it on the ground, was extremely volatile, extremely dangerous, and had become a way of life for people who are living in the Gulf region. And I will say that this agreement is welcome because it will provide further stability, not just for governments, but for every average day citizen who is seeking to have life return to normal, to not have to run for shelter in the evenings when the bombing would begin.
Juste Pour revenir au G7, est-ce que les Canadiens peuvent s'attendre à ce que M. Carney puisse rencontrer M. Trump ou au moins de faire avancer les discussions sur les négociations?
Je sais qu'il y aura des conversations entre le ministre Leblanc et l'ambassadeur Greer, mais je ne sais pas d'autres rencontres. Je sais parce que j'étais là avec le Premier ministre en Kananaskis l'année dernière qu'il y aura des rencontres sur l'itinéraire. Il y aura aussi des rencontres aux margines de les rencontres. Donc, on ne sait pas qu'est-ce qui va passer sur le terrain, mais je sais que chaque fois, le Premier ministre va pousser les intérêts canadiens. Donc, merci beaucoup, mes amis. À la prochaine.
As you know, the Prime Minister is presently in France at the G7, and we are obviously watching his latest travel abroad with great anticipation. For the last year, he has been traveling the world over with no actual trade deals, with no actual results for Canadians. Not a single solitary job is being negotiated for steel workers, for aluminum workers, for forestry workers, and for Canada's auto workers. We have seen a string of meaningless MOUs that have not delivered the jobs and the investment and the access to markets for Canadians that the Prime Minister has said he would conclude during his tenure as Prime Minister. And even now, less than a month away from CUSMA, we have not seen the type of urgency that the Prime Minister should bring to concluding a deal with the geography of North America and our biggest trading partner in the United States. We also know that one of the big topics that are going to be discussed in France today is the Iran nuclear negotiations. Obviously, we wish that this deal is one that delivers peace in the region and for the peoples of the region. For 47 years, we've watched the clerical military dictatorship of Iran promote a policy of nuclear enrichment, of terrorism that has sown chaos across the region, and the brutal repression of their own people, 30 to 40,000 murdered in January of this year alone. We are watching the negotiations very closely, but obviously we want to make sure we maintain skepticism about the regime and its intentions. Because after 47 years, we don't have a lot of reasons to believe that the regime has always been dealing in good faith. And finally, on overdose results, in terms of a decline that the government had discussed for the second year in a row, these results are obviously meaningful for the people who have gone through that process. But it's been now 11 years of the government that has not gone after the fentanyl kingpins, that has not changed a single solitary syllable in the criminal code to go after the traffickers of fentanyl. We want more aggressive action for those families who are struggling with this, for the victims of the fentanyl crisis, and we want a government that's acting with the urgency of something that has killed more Canadians than in the world wars. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your questions.
I'm wondering, as hopefully this war comes to an end, do you think, looking back, that the U.S. and Iran were right to take these actions? Was it worth it?
I suppose you mean the U.S. and Israel. Yes. I think that the Iranian regime, and conservatives have been consistent on this for well over a decade, to be very clear. The Iranian regime, for at least the last decade, if not the last half century, has been pursuing a policy of nuclear enrichment to survive as a regime, has been pursuing terrorism across the region, sowing chaos upon its neighbors with a determined goal to genocide the state of Israel out of existence, and has been brutally repressing its own people. Conservatives have long held the view that we want to see progress on those three measures for the people of Iran and for a stable Middle East. So while the negotiations are underway, we have yet to see the full details being shared with the world at large. We've seen certain actors describe parts of it. What we have not seen is the actual full discussion of what is being concluded today, what will be negotiated in the next 60 days, and we're very skeptical of the regime and its intentions because they've had very little proof to show that they're worth, that the words that they say are worth the paper they write them on.
But do you think the military action was worth it?
I think that Iran was at a point for breakout capability of nuclear enrichment, and they had protected that nuclear enrichment through the development of massive numbers of drones and ballistic missiles. Had they continued on their program of developing drones and nuclear missiles, we saw how long it took to degrade that capacity to this point. Had they continued on that path, they would have had a shield around their nuclear enrichment program, and a nuclear-enriched Iranian regime is a danger that the world cannot tolerate.
My last question here is, what do you think Canada and other countries, our allies, need to do to reinforce this deal and make sure that there is a lasting peace?
I think we need to do more than what Mark Carney has done, which has taken multiple positions over the course of this conflict. What we need to do is have a country like Canada demonstrate the strength and ambition of a major power. For example, the world has had an energy glut over the last 100 days. Had we been doing our work in producing our energy resources in oil and gas, we would have been able to offer a much more stable, a much more green, a much more responsible source of energy for the entire world, defanging the Iranian regime and its ability to leverage their own energy, but also their violation of international treaties when it comes to the Straits of Hormuz. I think that international leaders should be able to tell the difference between moral confusion and moral clarity and understand that the clerical regime in Tehran has been the single greatest source of instability and uncertainty in the region for the last half century, that it must be confronted, that they must not be permitted to have nuclear weapons, they must not be permitted to continue their program of terrorism, and that they must end the brutal repression of their own people.
Sorry, I just got one other question from my newsroom here. Should Canada commit to helping demining efforts proposed by Europe?
I think that Canada could have played a much stronger role throughout the course of this conflict, standing alongside allies who are confronting the brutal tyranny of Tehran. What they have done across the Strait of Hormuz by mining it is an abhorrent action. Not only must it be demined in the waters of the Hormuz, but it also must be confronted at the United Nations. They've violated so many conventions over the course of these last 100 days, if not the half century that preceded that. Canada should be a powerful and strong voice, as it once was under Prime Minister Stephen Harper, in confronting the clerical military dictatorship of Iran.
Can we help with those efforts?
I think there's many efforts we can help with, including demining.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's it for my questions.
Thank you very much.
Just want to take a moment and reflect on this most recent report from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, indicating that housing starts are down in Canada, about 5.2% year over year. I'd like to point out that, the Prime Minister, when he was running for office, promised to build at speeds not seen in a generation. The CMHC has also authored a report indicating that we need to build almost 500,000 homes a year for the next several years to restore affordability, and we are nowhere near that target, and in fact, it's getting worse. So the Prime Minister spent his first year in office rearranging the deck chairs and creating a third federal crown corporation, rearranging the roles of each of the other federal crown corporations with a promise to build at speeds not seen in generations, and that's simply not happening. We need more results. Canadians cannot wait any longer for a federal Liberal government that promises and never delivers.
Okay. What more do you think the Carney government needs to do? Or what is the Conservative plan that you're recommending?
Well, if the federal Liberal government actually followed Pierre Poilievre and my advice a couple of years back and actually worked at reducing the government burden and process and fees and taxes on housing, instead of creating another bureaucracy, we would have the results we're looking for. The biggest burden to getting more homes built in this country is, in fact, government. It's local government, it's provincial government, and it's federal government. It's the taxes and the fees at all levels. And so we need to focus on reducing that burden, whether it's the regulatory process, whether it's the fees and charges. In Ontario alone, about 30% of the cost of a new home is government. We need to reduce that burden. Otherwise, people can't afford to buy. And if people can't afford to buy, no one can afford to build. And so while Prime Minister Mark Carney promised to do these miraculous things, he spent a year creating more bureaucracy. That's not the solution that Canadians need. We need to get government out of the way.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Last week, and if so, what have you heard from them?
Well, we've heard from both sides, and I think more importantly in the lead up, what I've heard, and I've met with far too many parents who have lost kids because of social media. I've met with Center for Child Protection. We've heard too many of these stories. All of the evidence we see with respect to young people on social media is negative. Of course, there's going to be concerns when government is in this space, but we need to stand up and protect our kids.
What do you make of this exemption model, which feels a bit unique than maybe what other countries do? Are you on board with this idea?
I think it's a good time to get it to committee. We've seen other countries try to regulate in this space. In the absence of the U.S. regulating in this space, we need to work with allies. We also need to look at what other countries are doing, where it's succeeded and where it's failed. No bill goes through committee, few bills go through committee unamended, and this would be an excellent opportunity to look across the board, see what works, see what doesn't, and move forward and try to find what best fits for the Canadian space.
Do you have any sense of whether it could be sent to committee by the time you folks rise this week? Like, I know we only have a few days left.
That's a great question for the House Leader. So, anyways,
Thank
thanks
you
so
for
much.
stopping, Chris.
No problem.
Media Act. I know last time we spoke you were split on this idea of a social media ban for under 16. Where have you landed on this idea?
Yeah, so I'm actually reviewing the legislation. Look, I think it's an important issue. I've been hearing from my constituents. I intend to do more consultations with my constituents over the summer as well. We have to do everything in our capacity to protect children. As I mentioned before, I have a 10-year-old and 14-year-old, so these are very live conversations at home. My son, actually 14-year-old, said, "Oh good, I only have 2 years to worry about." So we need to find the right balance in protecting children, not also creating the capacity where they're circumventing the rules, because teenagers can do that. I also feel very strongly that if we are going to create this restriction, we need to make sure that we're creating other opportunities for young people to engage. When I was growing up, there was a lot of physical activity. There was opportunities to be out at the park and do other things, because kids will be kids. We need to help them develop, and so we need to keep investing in other activities, healthier activities for children to engage in.
Why not leave this to provinces to just ban phones in schools, and then at home parents can be responsible for what their kids can and cannot
I
do?
think there's something to be said about having a universal approach across the country. Look, I understand provinces have an important role to play. I've served provincially, but then you run the risk of having piecemeal approaches across the country as well. I think when you're looking at an important issue like protecting children, we need to make sure that we have standard norms and rules across the country.
Do you have any concerns about the timeline of how this might roll out? Like, there could be a ban and then a number of months go by and then a company be able to seek an exemption. Do you have any concerns about the impact that could have on, say, the users of this, of whether their accounts are suspended, then they can get back on?
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I want to really look at the legislation more closely, and I haven't done that in-depth research as to understand, and of course then as a parliamentarian contribute to how to make this legislation more effective. I want to hear from my constituents as well. I'm planning to do consultations during the summer with members of my community, because quite a few people have approached me in the past with views.
On this issue?
On this issue, oh absolutely. This is a real life issue among parents in particular, in terms of something needs to happen to protect children. I've heard mostly from people who want a ban or sort, especially after Australia did the same thing. People have reached out, and there are some people saying that's not the way to do it. And so I want to find where the balance is. The implementation piece is really important, around timelines, around how do we really be able to enforce a law like this. I mean, it's not clear to my mind at this moment that teenagers won't be able to easily circumvent. So how do you really do it in a way that rules are being followed? And lastly, the piece that I keep raising, which is to ensure that we create other opportunities for our children to engage in, because we want their healthy mental development, and so outdoor activities, investment in more recreational programs, those type of things are also important.
Thank you for stopping.
Thank you.
A ban for under 16, what you saw last week?
Well, I think that the government needs to make sure that they're guided by experts, and listening to, for example, the Toronto Hospital for Sick Kids, the Canadian Pediatric Society. They made it clear that they want a regulator in place that's independent regulator to protect children and ensure that social media giants are held accountable to ensure that their safety is protected.
What do you make of the fact that when it comes to AI chatbots, there is not a mandatory reporting rule in there?
Well, I think that needs to be fixed. That's pretty clear. We heard from Premier Eby and we've heard from other premiers across the country that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think there's other news today that needs to be talked about. And, you know, you heard the health minister talk today with the chief medical health officer about the toxic drug crisis. You know, this is a country that's had over 50,000 deaths. And to date, we haven't even had a national summit to address the toxic drug crisis. Heck, we had a summit to deal with auto theft, and I'm not saying that's not an important issue, but I can tell you the 15 families who lost loved ones yesterday and every single day right now, they'll tell you right now that this needs to be a top conversation in this country, and it's still not being addressed.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
The legislation from the government, what do you think about the AI chatbot situation, given everything that happened in Tumbler Ridge?
Yeah, I haven't seen too much of the legislation to dig into it, but I know there's a lot of concern around, again, what happened with OpenAI, and I think it's still before the courts now, so I'll just leave it at that.
Do you think there should be a mandatory reporting threshold?
I don't know if enough of the legislation to comment any further. Thank you.
Back from this privacy bill.
Well, you're going to know in a little while.
I know.
Yeah.
What do you make of the social media ban? Why are you guys taking this approach as opposed to maybe leaving it up to provinces to ban phones in schools and then just let parents
Look, I think,
regulate at home?
I mean, you heard Minister Miller. He's been pretty clear on why. You've heard what the UK is talking about doing. You've heard other jurisdictions take this up. I mean, we've got to figure out exactly how to make this work properly. Guardrails are hugely important. When you look at the impact of social media on kids under the age of 16, it's something that we have to take seriously. We've got to figure out the right way to do it. And at the end of the day, you know, there are not a whole lot of tools available at our disposal, but with the ones that we have, we need to make sure are being used in a way that protects kids and make sure that the vast majority of kids that are exposed to all kinds of things online, particularly on social media, have the protections that reasonable people would want their kids to have.
Do you like this path of allowing for exemptions?
Exemptions are going to be ones that are worked through. Obviously, there's going to be process committee's going to do its piece. There's going to be a lot of work that has to be in this. I'm not the arbiter on this. My view as a dad is a point of view of one, and I think that we need to be thinking about the best ways to keep our kids safe. There are going to be circumstances in which exemptions matter, but we have to make sure that they fit what we are trying to accomplish, and I'm confident that my colleagues, in particular those in committee, will do the work to make sure that when the bill comes out of this, that the aspiration of the bill, which is to keep kids safe, of that particular provision to keep kids safe, will land well.
Was there coordination with the UK to release this similar timing ahead of the G7 meeting?
I can't comment on that, but I do know that it's something that a lot of us are talking about across governments, because it matters, and you've seen the impact. Like, we're seeing the impact on kids daily. The research, the evidence is clear, and we're an evidence-based government, and we're going to make decisions that are going to be based on facts, based on what we hear from people, based on what we see, and on making sure that we're doing the thing that parents and kids are both asking us to do, which is to keep kids particularly safe.
This is a government that struggled to get this passed with the First Nations water bill tomorrow.
Well, certainly there was a number of amendments that were posed by the NDP the last time. Certainly I've heard that the government is pulling having clean, safe drinking water as a human right. I'm hoping that's incorrect. If that is correct, that's totally abhorrent. But they also need to protect source water, particularly with all the projects of national interest that they are announcing. Protecting our water sources when it's becoming one of the most precious resources globally is absolutely essential. Okay, thanks.
Legislation.
Actual money to fix the issues, as opposed to just a fluff bill that says they're going to create more bureaucracy in a bill that's one size fits all. It's a very vast, diverse community of 600 plus First Nations, and I don't want to see a fluff bill. I want to see consistent spending in towards of tangible results on First Nations.
Do you think there should be protections for source water?
I think that's a debate that Liberals have to solve from the current government's aspects. We'll see what they come up with.
As an Alberta MP, what do you think about 8 former Conservative MPs from Alberta saying they want Alberta to separate from Canada?
Alberta needs to stay in Canada, bottom line.
But does it hurt the message with your party taking the federalist angle to have former MPs saying the complete opposite to publications?
I'm not aware of the 4 MPs that you're speaking of, but I'll be crisscrossing the provinces. Some are saying for Alberta to stay in Canada.
Thanks.
You know, you got to get along with people on all sides of the house. So Greg and I will spend some time talking about issues that affect parliamentarians and how we need to get things done in this House.
But not being ported over to the Liberal side?
Oh, of course not. No,
Okay.
not at all. There's nobody that seriously considers that I would do that. Thank you, though.
Any reaction to the fact that there are at least 8 former Conservative MPs from Alberta who are saying they want to separate from Canada as your party is trying to launch a Federalist campaign this summer?
Gosh, I hadn't heard that. I'd like to know who those people are.
LeVar Payne, Jay Hill,
none of whom I've served with, right?
Rob Anders as well.
Wow, okay. None of whom I've served with and people I don't really know.
But does it make it more challenging for you when you have former Conservative MPs speaking out in this way while you were trying to launch this campaign?
Well, I think we're not launching a campaign. We're all speaking up for the Canada we want here. And the Canada we want is the Canada that we got elected to try and change for the better here. Now, if those are former parliamentarians that didn't get that job done when they were here, well, so be it, right? But I can tell you that our job is to continue to build a better Canada right here in the House of Commons. There's all kinds of things we can do. It's all kinds of things the Prime Minister can do at this point in time to kind of make sure we're actually moving forward on how we govern ourselves better as a country. And that's what our job is here. Let's get better outcomes for all of the country, every Canadian everywhere. That's our job. We'll continue to do it. We'll continue to make that case that that's the direction going forward.
Are you going to be staying only in your riding or crisscrossing the provinces?
I've got lots of work to do this summer, and last summer we were setting up the Economic Growth Council for the whole country. And those issues about how we deal with issues in Canada is something we're going to have to address, maybe with people across Alberta and maybe with people all the way across Canada about how we get a better country. But think about it. How many elections I've stood in 3 elections at this point in time. It's all about getting better results for people all the way across Canada, and that includes the way we treat the different provinces in Confederation.
What do you think of this idea of a proposed social media ban for those under 16?
I'm going to look at the legislation. We're going to take a look at what it means. Of course, there's discussions on both sides of the issue. What's in the realm of parents' control and what's in the realm of what's good for society, and where that saw-off meets. It's all about balance at the end of the day. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The fact that there's at least 8 former Conservative MPs from Alberta advocating for separation.
I think that Prime Minister Carney should do the greatest show of national and economic unity that he can and show Canadians exactly when that Pacific Pipeline is going to get built.
Does it make the Federalist campaign this summer harder at all?
Yeah, what would you like to hear on this specific pipeline?
All Albertans have a right to speak out loud about how they're feeling about the current state of intergovernmental relations between the federal government and Alberta.
What would you like to hear on this?